In today's lesson, I would like to focus on joining tables. And this is something that we touched on briefly in the previous lesson, but now we're going to dig into it in more detail. Now, to illustrate this idea, we want to create a couple tables. And I want you to think of Amazon. So with Amazon, we have orders or items. So you can imagine an order table will contain lots of order numbers, and each of these numbers will represent some item, like a PlayStation or a TV. Now, we need a way to connect these orders to users so that when I buy an item, there is some record to show that this user has purchased this item and this user has purchased that item. So to do this, we're going to create a couple tables. But to start, let's create a new database. And just for this lesson, we'll call it maybe it's our practice database. Next, we need to use that database. And now we want to create our users table. So this should be fairly familiar to you at this point. Create a table users, and it's going to have an ID. It's an integer. It should auto increment. Next, I'm going to keep this as short and condensed as humanly possible. Just know in a real world, you would have email addresses, you'd have full names, you would have passwords, enabled information, stuff like that. For now, I just want to keep it as simple as we can. And this will be a varchar, and we'll just set it to 100. All right, the final thing I need to do is set that primary key so that the ID field has to be unique. All right, that looks pretty good to me. We run that, and the table has been created. So let's insert into the users table, and we just need to insert the username. So values will be Jeffrey Way. There we go. We'll create another one for John Doe. And then maybe one more for Jane Doe. All right, so now if I run select star from users, now we have this very simple table with 3 usernames. Good. The next step is I want to create another table for the orders, the items that they have purchased. So create table orders, and within here, one more time, we're going to have that primary key. So that should auto increment. That's going to be something you get used to just with about every table you create. And within here, we're going to have something maybe number. This will be the order number. So when I purchase order 24572, that would represent the TV or the PlayStation. So we'll set that to an integer. And the final thing we need to do is associate that order number with one or more users. So we'll set user ID, which is an integer. So hopefully that makes sense. When we assign a user ID to an order number, that's how we will be able to specify that the user with an ID of 1, or myself, has purchased this order, and this order, and this order. Now the final thing, again, is to set up the primary key for the ID field. Now we would actually want to set up a foreign key relationship as well, but I don't want to get into that just yet. Just know that if you do something like this, it's something you should look into, but we're not there yet. All right, so let's run that. And now let's show tables. And we have our orders table and our users. So we'll describe orders and describe users. And there we go. That looks pretty good to me. So the next step is we need to insert just some gibberish orders. So insert into orders, and I'll clear the screen. And all we need to insert here is the order number as well as the user ID. So the values here will be some gibberish order number. I'll just add some right here. That'll represent some kind of item in their inventory. And the user who purchased that is 1. So if you're still confused about that user, remember, select star from users. All we're doing here is we're saying we're going to add this order right here, and the user with an ID of 1 should be attached to that order, or that user purchased the order. So let's do a couple more. We'll change this up a bit, something like that. Run that, so now I've purchased that order, and maybe one more. Finally, let's do another one. Maybe user number 2 bought that, and they bought this order as well. All right, so now if we select star from orders, now we can see that 3 orders were purchased by the user with an ID of 1, or Jeffrey Way, and then the user with an ID of 2, or John Doe, has purchased a couple items as well. So now we need a way to select the user and their orders, and this is where we can take advantage of joining tables. So watch what happens if I run select star from users. We already know that alone will just bring the table back. But now if I say inner join, and what inner join is going to do is return all rows just as long as there is a match in both tables that we specify. So we are working with users, but now we're going to inner join the orders table. And as long as what we specify, there's a row returned from each of those tables, that will be included in the result set from this command. So we're selecting everything from the users, but we're also going to inner join that orders table. Now, what is the condition? Well, the condition is on. And on confused me at first, but it helped me as soon as I heard the phrase on the condition. So join this table on the condition that the user ID in that orders table is equal to the ID that is on the users table, like so. So I'm going to run that command. And now here's what we get. Notice that we have joined in the other table, which is ID, number, and user ID. Good. But in this case, we don't need some of this extra information. I don't really need the user ID in the results set. So let's narrow this down a bit. Now I'm going to say select the users.id. Notice that I'm prepending the table name. And the reason why I'm doing that is because, look, there's a users.id field or column, and then there's also an orders.id. So if we were to specify ID and we're joining tables together, MySQL has no idea whether we are referring to the users table ID column or the orders table. And that's why we prefix the table name in those situations. So we will select the user ID. We're going to get username. And in this case, I don't have to specify the table name. I could if I wanted to, but I don't have to because there's no other column name called username. Next, I'm going to grab the number. But notice how when outside of that context of the orders table, number is a little bit ambiguous. So we can actually rename these on the fly. So I can say grab that number column, but I want that represented as order number. And that way, when it's returned, like up here, rather than saying number, it's now going to say order number. And we accomplish that by using the as keyword. So now we're selecting the user ID, the username. We're going to select the order name from the users table, inner join, because remember, if we want to work with the orders table, we need to join that table with the users table. So inner join orders on the condition, again, that orders.userid equals users.id. Let's run that again. And now I want you to note that this is a lot cleaner and easier to work with now. We have the ID, we have the username, and we have a list of each order. So we can go down here and say, okay, Jeffrey Way bought this order, then Jeffrey Way bought this item, then Jeffrey Way bought that item, and it's just kind of this track record of all the items that have been purchased. But what if, for example, we just want to see the orders that I purchased? Well, in that case, I'm going to hit up to go back a step, and now I'm going to add a where clause. So we've run our SQL command. Now I'm going to specify return all rows where the ID equals whatever we specify. In this case, if we want the Jeffrey Way ID, I need to grab number 1. And now take a look at this. Because I used ID, it's letting us know, hey, that's ambiguous. Are you talking about the user's ID column or the order's ID column? And that's why I noted we have to be explicit about that. So I will press up, and I'm going to clear the screen with Command K, and now I will replace that with users.id and run it. Now we have this result set that only contains the orders that I have purchased. But we can take this even further. So imagine that instead of returning the order numbers that I have purchased, maybe we just want a way to return how many orders have I purchased. I just want a number. So we'll have Jeffrey Way, and then in this case, if we select star from orders, what we want to return in this case is that I have purchased 3 orders. And this is where we can take advantage of SQL functions. So let's try this again. Now I'm going to run select users.id, the username, and now I'm going to use a function count. Within here, I will pass orders.number. So that is going to count the total number of orders that I have made. Now in this case, when we are not selecting a column name, we're just selecting count orders number. That will be set automatically, or we can specify a column name. And I'll do that again as order number. Next, we're going to select from the users. And once again, inner join orders on the condition that orders.userid equals users.id. finally, we're going to specify that we only want this to run on me. So where users.id equals 1. So let's run that and take a look. Now we have this custom column name. So just because it isn't specified in the table doesn't mean that you can't create your own on the fly. If we run this again and change it to 2, now we'll see John Doe has purchased 3 items and Jane Doe has purchased 0 items. So I'm going to clear the screen. So we've taken a look at inner join, but you will also come across things like left join as well as right join. Now, the only difference between those is that in the case of inner join, a row will only be included in the result set if a row is matched in each table. But that's not the case with left join and right join. So if I select star from users, inner join orders on the condition that users.id equals orders.id, we run that, we're familiar with this at that point. So now I'm going to change it from inner join to left join, and we get the same thing. Okay, but now let's make it right join. Now this will be a little bit different. If we run it, and this time, even if there are no matches in the left table or the users table, we're still going to return the results from the orders table. And that's how right join works. With left join, even if there are no orders returned, which is the right table, we're still going to return the users. So in this case, we have these order numbers, but they have not been assigned to any user, so they have not been purchased. So I don't want you to worry about those too much yet. They have their place, but at least for the beginning of your learning, stick with inner join. It's easier to wrap your mind around, and then when you do need left join or right join, you'll know where to look to find those. So now that you have a fairly decent understanding of working with databases, at least what you could pick up in 30 minutes, in the next lesson, I'm going to show you some GUI apps that will make working with these commands a little bit easier on the eyes. And then after that, we can learn how to actually connect to these databases from our PHP.